My name is Ariana, and at 25, I thought I was ready for anything. But the day of my grandmother's funeral proved me wrong. That day, which should have been a tribute to her memory, turned into the scene of my greatest humiliation. I watched in silence as my family, like a pack of vultures, descended upon her empire, dividing assets and arguing over the inheritance. Meanwhile, an envelope was simply thrust into my hands. Inside was just a plain ticket. By the way, write in the comments what corner of the world you're watching this video from. And if you've ever felt invisible among your closest relatives, be sure to give this a like and subscribe. Believe me, you'll definitely want to know what happened next. It all began with the reading of my grandmother Charlotte's will, which took place in her lawyer's office. It wasn't just an office, but a huge penthouse with panoramic windows overlooking the entire city. The sterile, expensive atmosphere was oppressive in its exclusivity. My mother, Catherine, instead of feigning grief, was touching up her flawless makeup, looking at the dark screen of her phone. My father, Richard, nervously tapped an expensive pen on the table, his thoughts clearly already far away, in the world of stocks and investments he was about to make. My brother, David, sprawled in a leather chair as if the office already belonged to him. And my cousin, Ella, was hastily typing something into the calculator on her phone, then showing the screen to her husband, and they exchanged greedy smiles. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's affairs for decades, put on his glasses and began reading in a dry, official tone. To my son-in-law, Richard, I bequeath the controlling stake in our family investment fund. My father's face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen since his last major deal. The fund was worth at least $50 million. To my daughter, Catherine, I leave our luxurious ranch in Aspen, with all its furnishings and modern art collection. My mother gave a barely perceptible but triumphant nod. That residence alone was worth a fortune. To my grandson, David, goes my private jet and the entire portfolio of luxury real estate in Miami. David smirked victoriously, leaning back in his chair. The jet alone was enough to set him up for life. To my granddaughter, Ella, I bequeath our villa on the French Riviera and a lifetime membership to the exclusive country club. Ella gasped and grabbed her husband's arm, her eyes shining with greed. Then Mr. Henderson fell silent and looked up from the papers, his gaze landing directly on me. The room went quiet, and all heads turned in my direction as if on command. My heart pounded in my chest. This was my moment. Grandma Charlotte always said I was her kindred spirit. She was the one who taught me about art. We would walk for hours along the coast as she told me how she built her empire from scratch. I was sure she couldn't have forgotten about me. She must have left me something truly important. To my granddaughter, Ariana. Mr. Henderson said slowly. I leave this envelope. He picked up a plain white envelope from the table. And that was it. Just an envelope. For a moment, there was silence, and then the room filled with stifled laughter. My mother, Catherine, let out a soft chuckle and patronizingly touched my arm. Don't worry, darling, she whispered, I'm sure it's something very personal. Perhaps a sentimental letter. But I saw the triumph in her eyes. To them, this was a show. They found it amusing. Poor Ariana. The granddaughter who spent every summer with her grandmother, helping her catalog her art collection, who listened for hours to her stories of business highs and lows. I got an envelope, while the others received fortunes. What a surprise. David's voice dripped with sarcasm. Looks like your beloved grandmother didn't value you as much as you thought. Her words cut deep. For 25 years, I had been the good girl, the responsible one, the one who always came to help. And in the end, it turned out that to them, I was just a footnote in the will. At that moment, my brother David leaned toward me with a wide grin on his face. What's in there, sis? A gift certificate? David quipped. That would be so like Grandma, she always thought you didn't know how to handle real money. I clutched the envelope tighter, my fingers trembling slightly. It was almost weightless, but I could feel more than just a folded piece of paper inside. Something hard, small. Definitely more than just words. My cousin Ella spoke up from the other end of the table. Don't be so upset, Ariana. I'm sure Grandma Charlotte left you something symbolic. Something to help you in life. Her voice was filled with such fake pity that I wanted to scream. I couldn't take it anymore. I shot to my feet, my chair scraping loudly as it pushed back. Excuse me, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling, I need to step out. Their laughter followed me as I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard my mother, Catherine, say, "She's always so dramatic." Someone else added, "Charlotte probably left her old brooch or an apple pie recipe." Only when I was in the silent elevator, alone with my reflection in the mirrored wall, did I allow myself to breathe. My hands were still shaking as I finally tore open the edge of the envelope. Inside was a first-class ticket to Nice, on the French Riviera, departing next week. Beneath it was a note, written in Grandma Charlotte's elegant, familiar handwriting. Just one sentence: "Your trust fund will be activated on your 25th birthday, my dear. It's time to claim what is rightfully yours." But that wasn't what made me grab the elevator wall to keep from falling. There was something else in the envelope. A business card made of thick, embossed cardstock and a bank document folded in four. Engraved on the card was, Jean-Pierre Duval, Managing Director, Duval Private Wealth Management. And on the back, in the same handwriting as my grandmother's, "He is your trustee. Trust him." I unfolded the bank statement. It was from a Swiss bank and addressed to the Ariana Trust Fund. And then I saw the line for account balance. The number was so long my brain refused to process it. $360 million. I stared at the numbers, counting the zeros. Again. And again. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so much the paper rustled. This couldn't be real. It must be some kind of prank, the cruelest joke of my life. But the watermarks on the document were real, the account numbers looked authentic, and my grandmother's handwriting on the business card was the same one I had known my whole life. Returning to my tiny apartment that night, I stared at the business card for a long time before mustering the courage. My hands shook as I dialed the international number to Geneva. I was transferred several times, answered countless security questions, until finally, I was connected to a man who spoke perfect English with a slight French accent. He confirmed the reality of what felt like a dream. "Yes, mademoiselle," the banker said in a calm voice. "Your trust fund was established by your grandmother, Madame Charlotte, when you were 15. For the past 10 years, it has been under our active management. Your grandmother was very precise in her instructions. The fund was to come into your full possession on your 25th birthday. But I never signed any documents," I whispered, still in disbelief. "Your grandmother acted as the founder. Since you were a minor at the time, your consent was not required," he explained patiently. "Since then, the fund has generated income, and all profits have been reinvested into a diversified portfolio of international business assets." International business assets. That phrase made me freeze. I remembered all those long evenings spent with my grandmother, discussing her art collection. She would ask my opinion on buying a particular painting as an investment. We talked about the hotel business during our walks along the coast. She told me about the risks and opportunities of the stock market. I thought they were just conversations. I thought she was just sharing stories from her life. But now I understood, she was teaching me. She was preparing me. "What are these assets?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Mademoiselle, I am not authorized to disclose such information over the phone," the banker replied. "However, Mr. Duval received clear instructions from your grandmother. He will provide you with a full report on the portfolio as soon as you arrive on the French Riviera." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my modest apartment, hypnotically staring at the bank statement. At the same time, our family group chat was blowing up with notifications. My brother David was already showing off pictures of private jet interiors, and my cousin Ella was sending links to luxury yacht clubs, deciding which one would be graced by her presence. No one. Not a single one of them even asked what was in my envelope. The next morning, I was having breakfast with my parents and made the mistake of sharing my plans. "I'm going to use the ticket Grandma left me," I said as casually as possible. I'm flying to the French Riviera next week. My father, Richard, nearly choked on his espresso. The French Riviera? He raised a skeptical eyebrow. Ariana, do you have any idea how much that costs? The hotel alone will cost you a fortune. You can't afford it. Your modest teacher's salary barely covers your rent, let alone trips like that. I mentally pictured the bank statement in my purse and calmly replied, it's a first-class ticket, and it's already paid for. My mother, Catherine, let out a short, condescending laugh. Ariana, darling, the French Riviera is a place for, well, for us. For people with real wealth. You'll stick out like a sore thumb. It's all high fashion, exclusive clubs, and super yachts. If only they knew. Well, at least you can take a few photos for your blog, my brother David chimed in with a smirk. Show your students what truly rich people's lives are like, and then go back to your chalk and blackboard. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. But this time, something new was rising beneath the usual shame. A quiet confidence. Strength. The realization that I was no longer the poor relative they saw before them. Maybe Grandma had a good reason for sending me there specifically, I said softly. My mother rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, darling, don't be so naive. Your grandmother was 90. At that age, the mind isn't so clear, she waved it off. It was probably just an old woman's whim. But I knew that Charlotte's mind was sharper than all of theirs combined. I knew my mother was wrong. Grandma Charlotte had remained sharp until the very end, discussing world markets and new art projects with me. When she spoke of Geneva or the French Riviera, she spoke of them not as postcard locations, but as her playground. That same day, I took a day off from work and spent several hours online. Jean-Pierre Duval and his company, Duval Private Wealth Management, were more than real. Financial publications described him as one of the most influential private wealth managers in Europe, handling the affairs of elite family dynasties. And, apparently, I was now one of them. The night before my flight, packing my few decent dresses into a suitcase, I tried to summon all my resolve. The phone rang. It was my mother, with a last-ditch effort to dissuade me. Ariana, this is pure madness. You could cash in that ticket and pay off your credit card debt. The ticket is non-refundable, Mom, I replied evenly. Well, then at least promise you won't embarrass our family. Please, don't go telling everyone you're Charlotte's granddaughter and demanding special treatment. I silently ended the call without making any promises. At the airport, checking my single suitcase, I saw my reflection in the glass wall. 25 years old, brown hair, average figure. On the outside, the same Ariana as always. But I felt that this girl would never be the same again. To my family, there was nothing remarkable about me. But Grandma Charlotte saw what they missed. She often said I had her grip, her business acumen, and her stubbornness. I was about to find out if she was right. The first-class cabin on the flight to Nice was like another world, one I had only seen in movies. A flight attendant, addressing me as Mademoiselle Scott, offered me a glass of champagne with genuine care even before takeoff and ensured I wanted for nothing throughout the flight. As the ocean stretched out beneath us, I kept replaying the number from the bank statement in my head. $360 million. It wasn't just wealth. It was power. Security. Freedom from the fear of rent and student loans for the rest of my life. After landing in Nice, I was about to find a regular taxi. But as I walked into the arrivals hall, I saw a man in a sharp suit holding a sign. On it was written, Mademoiselle Ariana Scott, beneficiary of the Charlotte Trust. For a moment, my knees felt weak. The driver, impeccably polite, silently loaded my suitcase into a black executive sedan. As we drove along the Promenade d'Anglais, he spoke first. Is this your first visit to this area, Mademoiselle Scott? Yes, was all I could manage, staring at the azure sea. It's beautiful. Monsieur Duval is eagerly awaiting your meeting, the driver continued. For the past few years, He has personally overseen the assets of your trust located here on the French Riviera. Assets. Plural. Nice revealed itself to me gradually, like a jewelry box. First, the old port appeared, filled with snow-white yachts, each worth as much as a small town. Then we approached the legendary Hotel Negresco, its luxurious facade with the pink dome shining in the midday sun. The driver led me through corridors adorned like an art gallery, in a building that resembled a palace. I felt completely out of place. Finally, he opened the doors to a huge office with a panoramic view of the Mediterranean Sea. Seated at the desk was Jean-Pierre Duval, the man from the financial magazine photos. Tall, impeccably dressed, he rose to meet me with a confident smile. "Mademoiselle Scott," he said, extending his hand. His voice was calm and cultured. "I am Jean-Pierre. A pleasure to meet you." I shook his hand timidly. "Monsieur Duval. I have so many questions." He smiled warmly. "Please, call me Jean-Pierre. And I hope, will have all the answers." He gestured for me to sit. "Your grandmother, Charlotte, was a brilliant investor, Ariana. She created this trust when you were 15, with clear instructions regarding your, let's say, practical education." Practical education. All our conversations about business, art, and people. "She wasn't just chatting with you," Jean-Pierre said softly. "She was preparing you." He opened a folder. "The trust owns a controlling stake in a chain of boutique hotels in Europe, a portfolio of commercial real estate in New York and Tokyo, and a very valuable art collection." I sat stunned, unable to utter a word as he continued. "Charlotte also arranged for you to receive an annual allowance of $70,000. Enough for you to live modestly without drawing attention. My so-called savings, it had been her money all along. Your grandmother wanted you to understand the value of work and live a normal life before learning about your true financial situation," Jean-Pierre added. At that moment, everything clicked into place. I understood why, unlike my teacher colleagues, I could always pay my rent without trouble. I realized why money worries never weighed on me as heavily as they did on my friends. And I finally understood where my grandmother's unwavering confidence about my future came from. "Jean-Pierre," I said, my lips barely moving, what is my actual net worth?" He glanced at another report on his desk, then looked me straight in the eye. "As of this morning," he said calmly, "the net asset value of the trust is $1,200,000,000. I gripped the arms of the chair, feeling the room start to spin. "Mademoiselle Scott, you are a billionaire. And you have been from the start." I spent the rest of the day in Jean-Pierre's office, immersed in mountains of documents that confirmed his every word. Before me lay trust agreements, property deeds from around the world, financial statements, and tax returns. An entire army of professionals I never knew existed had been working for years for a trust one knew nothing about. "Your grandmother was extremely precise about the timing," Jean-Pierre explained as I mechanically flipped through the pages. "She insisted that you live a normal life, learn the value of earned money and responsibility, before this enormous fortune was placed on your shoulders." "But why all the secrecy?" I asked. "Why couldn't she just tell me?" Jean-Pierre looked at me with sympathy. "Because she knew your family very well, Ariana. She understood that if they found out about your true inheritance, their attitude towards you would change forever. They would either hate you out of envy or try to manipulate you. They would stop seeing you as a person and only see a walking bank account." The scene from the will reading flashed in my mind, their mocking laughter, my mother's patronizing tone, the greed in their eyes. Grandma had given them one last chance, and they had failed spectacularly, showing their true colors. "Your grandmother wanted you to see their true attitude before you held the power to change everything," Jean-Pierre continued. "She believed you needed to know exactly who valued you as a person and who would only value your money. And now it's up to you to decide what to do with what has always been yours." That evening, Jean-Pierre arranged a private tour for me of the flagship hotel in the chain, Lucille Blue Hotel and Spa, located right on the promenade. As the general manager, an elegant man named Monsieur Leclerc, guided me through the property, I kept repeating the same thought to myself: I am not a guest. I am the owner. The hotel was a true gem: unique suites with sea views, a Michelin-starred restaurant, and a quiet rooftop garden. It all felt completely surreal. For the last 3 years, our average occupancy has been 94%, Monsieur Leclerc reported as we stood on the terrace of the most luxurious suite. Your grandmother, or rather, your trust, was the perfect owner. She never interfered with operations but always approved investments in quality. It's amazing how deeply she understood the hotel business without ever working in it, he added. But at that moment, I realized she had worked in it. Through me. All our conversations about what creates perfect service, how to make a guest feel special, the fine line between luxury and comfort. She wasn't just teaching me. She was learning herself, using me as her source of information, an ordinary person who understood what other people expect from an exceptional vacation. Returning to my suite, which now felt like a part of my new reality, I opened the family group chat. It was still buzzing. David was choosing between 2 penthouses in Miami. Ella was seriously discussing launching her own lifestyle brand. Looking at their petty squabbles against the backdrop of everything I had learned that day, I couldn't help but give a bitter smile. They were celebrating their millions while I was silently sitting on billions. But the main discovery wasn't the money, but the realization of how wisely my grandmother had protected me. She gave them quick cash, but she gave me something priceless: time to realize my own power. Just then, a message came from my father: I hope you're not spending too much on your vacation. I glanced around the presidential suite with its sea view and replied with one word: it's a very educational trip. The next morning, Jean-Pierre arranged for me to fly on a private jet to New York. Settling into the jet seat, which, it turned out, also belonged to me, I thought about my next move. I could go back and drop the truth bomb on them. Or I could be strategic, as my grandmother had taught me. As we took off, I made a decision. It was time for a game of chess. My hotel in New York, the Astoria Grand, was even more impressive, a skyscraper of glass and steel in the heart of Manhattan. My personal skyscraper. The general manager, Ms. Hayes, met me at the airport in a limousine that would have left my family speechless. She was the epitome of professionalism: smart, composed, and completely unaware she was speaking to her real boss. Mademoiselle Scott, Ms. Hayes began as we settled into the limo's luxurious interior. A representative from your trust informed me that you wish to conduct a full inspection of the property. I will be delighted to show you everything we have achieved. How long have you worked here? I asked. 7 years. I've watched this hotel grow from the beginning. Your trust is the perfect owner, always supporting innovation while taking a sensible approach to risk management. The hotel tour made me realize the true scale of my inheritance. Ms. Hayes showed me financial reports with figures that made my head spin. The hotel complex, restaurants, and entertainment venues, all worked as a single, perfectly tuned, and incredibly profitable machine. By the way, your trust was recently considering an expansion, Ms. Hayes remarked casually as we sat in the penthouse, which I now knew belonged to me. They showed interest in similar projects in Dubai and Singapore. Really? I tried to make my voice sound as indifferent as possible. And what are the plans? Just a preliminary assessment for now, but the results look very promising. Your financial team is quite optimistic about international expansion. My financial team. I had a financial team. That day, I spent several hours in video conferences with people I had never seen before but who had been managing my assets for years. I spoke with my personal accountant, who filed my tax returns, maintaining the legend of a modest schoolteacher. I met my investment manager, who had turned my grandmother's hundreds of millions into a fortune exceeding $1 billion. I also met my legal team. Your grandmother foresaw that you would want to act decisively, the head lawyer explained, especially in areas where you have family connections. That phrase, family connections, sparked an idea in my head. Later that evening, over dinner with Ms. Hayes, I casually brought up the topic of acquisitions. Hypothetically, I said, how difficult would it be to acquire a small shipping company for about $30 million? She didn't even bat an eye. For your trust, 30 million is a negligible amount. We could close the deal in a month. Is this hypothetical interest prompted by anything specific? I thought of my father's company, which I had heard about since childhood. He was in debt after a recent expansion. A cash injection would solve his problems, and hand control over to me. Perhaps, I answered evasively. Later that night, I called Jean-Pierre and laid out my plan. You want to buy your father's company? He asked after listening. I want to save it, I corrected. He's in trouble but too proud to ask for help. An offer from the right buyer is his only way out. And you consider yourself the right buyer? I'm the only buyer, I said firmly, who cares about his employees and the legacy he's built. Jean-Pierre paused for a moment. Ariana, this is your first major decision in your new capacity. Are you sure you want to start with family? They won't know it's me, I replied. To them, it will just be an anonymous offer from Swiss investors. And you're comfortable with that deception? He asked. I remembered their laughter, their pity, their condescension. For now, yes, I said firmly. The next morning, I flew back to Boston with a clear plan. I would give them one last chance. If they didn't take it, I would show them the price of their mistake. Back in my modest apartment, I sorted through real estate reports from around the world while my family lived in ignorance. The contrast was almost palpable. In the morning, I was discussing a deal with my team in Dubai that exceeded their entire inheritance combined. And now, I was driving to my parents for dinner, where they would surely ask if I had spent too much on my vacation. A family dinner was scheduled for that evening. My mother had asked me to bring my laptop to help them with financial planning for their inheritances, since I was good with computers. The irony was almost tangible, considering the kind of planning I'd been doing all day. I had instructed my lawyers to prepare a purchase offer for my father's company. The reports showed his business was in much worse shape than I thought. He was drowning in debt after an expansion and was an easy target for a hostile takeover. Then the phone rang. It was Ms. Hayes from New York. Ariana, the analysis is complete. You were right, the company is profitable, but on the verge of a liquidity crisis. Our offer will solve their problems and give you a valuable asset. How soon can we act? I asked. We can make a generous, anonymous offer through a shell company as early as next week. No ties to you. And if he refuses? Frankly, Ms. Hayes replied, he's not in a position to refuse. He needs the cash within 6 months, or he'll face bankruptcy. After hanging up, I stared out the window. Part of me felt guilty for what I was planning, but another, larger part remembered all the family dinners where I was ignored and considered too stupid for serious conversations. When I arrived at my parents' house, the whole family was there. David was flipping through private jet catalogs, Ella was showing her mother design concepts for her new villa. My father was anxiously reading financial reports. Ariana! Ella exclaimed. Our world traveler. How was the French Riviera? The trip was very educational, I replied, taking my usual seat. I still can't believe you went there, David muttered, not looking up from his tablet. It's all millionaires. You must have felt awkward. You get used to it, I answered quietly. My father raised his glass. Well, here's to Charlotte's legacy. She took great care of the family. Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone but me. I sat in silence, watching them celebrate an inheritance that was just a fraction of mine. Ariana, your glass, my mother reminded me. No, thank you. Someone has to keep a clear head to help with the paperwork, I replied. My father nodded approvingly, always so practical. While they discussed their plans, David dreaming of a jet, Ella of a career as an influencer, I looked at them in a new light. They weren't evil. They just judged me based on the information they had. What would they do when the information changed? Business at the company is great, my father lied over dessert, pretending everything was under control. We're focused on growth, maybe even buying out competitors. How's your cash flow? I asked, as if it were a casual question. My father was taken aback. It's manageable. There are some debts, but the forecasts are good. Do you have contingency funds for unexpected expenses? I continued. Silence fell at the table. Everyone stared at me. Ariana, my mother laughed, don't worry your head about it. Business is your father's territory. I'm just curious, I replied calmly. Grandma Charlotte always said that cash flow is the engine of any business, I added. We're fine, my father snapped, though I saw his jaw tighten. The company is stable. But I had seen the reports. They were one step away from disaster. Later, in the kitchen, my mother pulled me aside. Honey, I know you want to be involved, but you shouldn't ask your father such complicated questions. It's not really your area. I almost laughed. Not my area. I owned companies whose monthly profits exceeded my father's company's annual revenue. Of course, Mom. Just making small talk. I know, dear, she patted my arm. But let's leave the business talk to the men, okay? On the way home, I dialed my team. My voice was even and cold. Monday morning, make the offer. Generous terms, short deadline, cash payment. And if they ask about the buyer? I smiled. Tell them it's a private European firm interested in supporting American business. Technically, it wasn't even a lie. By the way, has your own family ever underestimated you? Tell me about it in the comments. And be sure to stay with us to see what happens when my family finds out who they're dealing with. The offer arrived on Tuesday. My father called me at school during a break, his voice trembling with tension. Ariana, something unexpected has happened. We've received a buyout offer from some foreign investment group. I feigned concern. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, he replied. The offer is very, very generous. Almost too generous. I just don't understand why they'd want us. What does the lawyer say? That's the thing. They want an answer by Friday. Such a short deadline means they're serious. Maybe they see potential that you're missing? I suggested innocently. Perhaps. Listen, come for dinner on Wednesday. I want to discuss everything with the family. You've always been attentive to detail, I need your opinion. My opinion. If only he knew whose opinion he really needed. Wednesday's dinner promised to be very different from the last one. The atmosphere at dinner on Wednesday was completely different. Instead of idle boasting, the air was thick with tension. My father had spread stacks of documents across the dining table like a general before a decisive battle. The offer is for $45 million, he announced once everyone was gathered. That's 25% above the company's market value. David immediately looked up from his phone. 45 million? Dad, that's incredible. Sell it, don't even think twice. It's not that simple, my father countered. If I sell, what will I do? I've dedicated 30 years of my life to this business. You'll retire, Ella tossed out casually. You'll travel, relax. I'm only 55, my father sighed. Too young to retire and too old to start something new. I picked up a copy of the offer, carefully studying every line. It took all my acting skills to show serious concern on my face instead of the triumph I felt inside. The terms were exactly as I had ordered, generous enough to be tempting, but not so much as to arouse suspicion. What company is this? I asked, pointing to the logo at the top of the document. Geneva Equity Partners, my father replied. A Swiss investment firm. Apparently, completely legitimate and with a good reputation. They specialize in maritime logistics, he added. Without looking up from the document, I started asking questions. What are their plans for integration? Policy on job retention? A change in management? Silence fell over the table again. Ariana, my mother said slowly, for a schoolteacher, you're asking very specific questions. Grandma Charlotte always taught me to read the fine print, I replied, continuing to study the page. Actually, the terms here are excellent. They guarantee all jobs for 3 years and won't touch the current management. How would you know these are excellent terms? David asked suspiciously. I shrugged. I read the business press sometimes. It's interesting if you approach it analytically. My father was looking at me with a completely new expression. Ariana, you're asking better questions than my lawyer. It seems you inherited more from Charlotte than we all thought. We discussed the offer for another hour, and I could see my father's resolve not to sell the company melting away with each passing minute. The offer was too good, and the financial relief too tempting. I have to accept it, my father finally breathed out. Money like that doesn't just fall into your lap, and the stress from the debt is just killing me. The deadline is Friday at 6 p.m. This is my only chance. Later, in the kitchen, my mother said, I think your father feels relieved. Sometimes, selling a business at the right time is the wisest decision, I replied carefully. She looked at me with unexpected respect. You were very insightful tonight. You have a real business mind. Maybe you're too smart to be just a teacher. This was coming from the woman who had laughed in my face just a couple of weeks ago. On Friday, minutes before the deadline, my father signed the papers. He was $45 million richer and no longer the owner of the company. At 6:30, I celebrated quietly in my apartment when Ms. Hayes called to confirm the deal had closed. The company now officially belongs to Geneva Equity Partners, which, in turn, is controlled by your trust, she reported. Any further instructions? No changes, I ordered. Same staff, same management. On the outside, everything should remain as it was. And the former owner? Ms. Hayes asked. He doesn't need to know who the ultimate buyer is just yet, I replied. And one more thing. Start looking for residential property for me in Boston. Something that will make a statement. The next morning, my father called to gather everyone for a celebratory lunch. To new beginnings. He announced cheerfully. I smiled, new beginnings. Sounds perfect. Getting ready for the meeting, I looked at my reflection. He thought he had sold the company to faceless investors, never suspecting he had sold it to his own daughter. The daughter he had underestimated for 25 years. The daughter who was just getting started. The lunch was at my father's country club. It all felt like a play where only I knew the ending. To wise business decisions, my father toasted. And to Charlotte's legacy. To Grandma, I added quietly. For teaching us to see opportunities. Everyone drank. My father paused for a moment. You know, he said, your grandmother always insisted on thinking globally. That our regional business was too small. Maybe selling to this international company is exactly what she would have wanted. My phone vibrated silently in my lap. A message from Singapore confirmed that the hotel deal was ahead of schedule. The next, from London, showed double-digit growth in the real estate portfolio. While my fortune approached the $1.3 billion mark, the sums being discussed at the table were far more modest. David, for instance, was already allocating my father's $45 million, insisting on the immediate purchase of a yacht for Miami. His financial horizon, it seemed, didn't extend beyond the next party. When I suggested my father consider long-term investments in commercial real estate, Ella burst out laughing. Look at Ariana, our new financial guru, she quipped. Now she's going to tell us about diversification. I just smiled. You have to get ideas from somewhere, I said, thinking of my team of analysts in Zurich. Their taunts no longer hurt, they were background noise from another, much smaller world. After this farce, I left. I needed to see something real. I found myself in a parking lot across the street from the Scott Shipping offices. My company. I sat in my car, just looking at the building, at the people leaving after a day's work. Each of them was a part of my world, though they didn't know it. My family's celebration felt infinitely distant. This step was the next in my strategy, which I had just discussed with Jean-Pierre. His call caught me while I was still looking at the Scotch shipping office. "Well, Ariana," he asked, "how does your first acquisition feel?" I answered honestly, no guilt. Just a feeling that everything has fallen into place. And the secrecy? It was necessary. If they knew the truth, it would have ruined everything. They needed to evaluate the deal, not the buyer. "And what is your next move, mademoiselle?" I looked at the city I had always considered mine, but in which I felt invisible. "I think it's time to stop hiding, Jean-Pierre. I want to buy a house." His voice was already smiling. "Any particular one?" My answer to him became my assignment for Meredith Blackwood, Boston's top luxury real estate agent, whom I called next. At first, her tone was politely professional, but as soon as I mentioned my budget, the politeness was replaced by laser focus. "Excuse me, Ms. Scott," her voice became deferential, "may I ask what your line of work is?" "International investments. Hospitality and real estate," I replied, repeating my new status. "I'm considering Boston as a permanent residence. I have family roots here." The day with Meredith Blackwood was like a dream. We moved through mansions, each of which could have housed the entire block where I grew up. One, for $15 million, even had its own lake. It was all impressive, but meaningless, until we arrived at the last property. She called it the Westfield Estate. $20 million, 30 acres of land, and a view that stretched over all of Boston. As we stood on the master bedroom terrace, I saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible patch of land far below. My parents' neighborhood. From here, I could watch their world while remaining completely invisible. This wasn't just a house. It was an observation tower. The perfect chess position. "I'm buying it," I said. Meredith, who was just showing me something on her tablet, froze. "I'm sorry?" "This house. I'm making an offer." She was stunned. "Ms. Scott, perhaps you'd like to think it over, analyze the market." I cut her off. "Full asking price. Cash. I want to close in 2 weeks." She looked at me, clearly doubting my sanity. "That's $20 million, Ms. Scott." "I know," I replied calmly, pulling out my phone and hitting a speed dial number. I put it on speaker. "Jean-Pierre?" I said when he answered. "It's Ariana. Please initiate the purchase of a property called Westfield Estate." "Yes, full price. We need everything ready in 2 weeks." I looked at Meredith, whose eyes were as wide as saucers. "Ms. Scott, forgive my directness, but what exactly is your line of work?" I didn't go into detail. Simply put, I own assets. Hotels, commercial real estate, logistics. The contrast that evening was almost comical. I was sitting in my parents' kitchen, in the house where I grew up, and at that very moment, my phone confirmed the successful transfer of $20 million. "What did you do today, sweetie?" my mom asked, putting dinner on the table. "I was productive," I replied, looking at property. My mom smiled. "Wonderful. Did you find a bigger apartment?" I nodded. "You could say that." My father was glued to his tablet, processing the news of selling his business. "You know what I found out? The buyers, Geneva Equity Partners, aren't just investors. They're systematically buying up logistics companies. My sale is part of their larger plan for a market takeover." I kept a straight face. "Maybe they see something in the industry that others don't." "Maybe. But I can't help but wonder if I sold too cheap," he sighed. "If they're building a whole network, my firm was a key piece for them." "You got an excellent price, Dad." "It was a well-considered decision," I gently countered. He was silent for a moment. "You know, Charlotte always said that consolidation was the future. That sooner or later, the giants would swallow the small players. Maybe these investors are just fulfilling her prophecy." He had no idea how close to the truth he was. Charlotte's granddaughter was that very investor. Just then, my phone vibrated. A message from Meredith, transfer complete. Ms. Scott, congratulations on the acquisition of your new estate. I put my phone away, a smile playing on my lips. My move-in date was in 2 weeks. It was time to stop being a shadow. For my move, I chose the best company in Boston, the one that serves the elite. As their massive trucks lined up at the gates of my new estate, I dialed my mother's number. I'm moving today, I announced. That's wonderful, honey. Did you finally find a nice 2-bedroom? Her voice was full of condescension. You could say that. Come and see. She agreed, and I dictated the address for Westfield Estate, then hung up to savor the moment. The estate was already grand, but now it was coming to life. Movers and gloves were carrying in furniture delivered straight from New York and crates of art I had acquired at auction. I stood in the middle of the vast driveway, giving instructions for the installation of a modern sculpture. A phone call pulled me from my thoughts. It was my father, and his voice was tense. Ariana, are you sure you gave your mother the right address? Absolutely. What's the problem? She says she's at the gates of Westfield Estate. The $20 million mansion that some mysterious investor just bought. I looked at my reflection in one of the giant windows. I'm not at the gates, Dad, I smiled. I'm inside. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ariana, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. Another pause, and then, we're coming in. From the spacious foyer, I watched their modest sedan slowly drive up the lane, looking tiny next to the moving vans. They stopped but didn't get out, just sat there looking at the house as if it were a mirage. Finally, they emerged from the car and, as if in a dream, slowly walked towards the front door, where I was waiting for them. I swung the door open for them. Ariana, my mother breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Mom, Dad, I said calmly. Welcome to my new home. They stepped over the threshold and froze. Their gazes shot upward to the 2-story high ceiling, where light streamed in. Instead of a chandelier, a huge, modern glass installation hung in the center of the foyer, and a sleek, floating staircase led to the second floor. Ariana, my father began, choosing his words carefully. How did you manage this? I made an offer, and it was accepted, I answered simply. An offer for $20 million, he clarified. 21, to be precise. I had to negotiate. My mother clung to my father's arm for support. Honey, this is absurd. You're a schoolteacher. Not anymore, I corrected. Yesterday was my last day. I gave them a tour, watching their faces shift to utter bewilderment. I showed them the home theater with velvet seats, which was larger than any screen in the local cinema. Then we went out to the living room, where an entire glass wall slid away, merging the space with a terrace and an infinity pool overlooking the city. Every step through this house only amplified their astonishment. When we reached the master bedroom, on the very terrace with a view of their house, my father couldn't hold back any longer. Ariana, explain yourself. Now. Where did all this come from? I walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Remember the envelope Grandma Charlotte left me? The one you all laughed at? They were silent. It wasn't just a letter. It was a ticket to the French Riviera. And a notification. I turned to face them. A notification that my trust fund had been activated. Grandma set it up for me when I was 15. On my 25th birthday, I gained access to everything. I became a billionaire. My father staggered and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, as if his strength had left him. That can't be possible, he muttered. Oh, it's very possible, I said. For decades, Grandma bought up assets all over the world and put them in my trust. I own a hotel chain in Europe, skyscrapers in New York and Tokyo, and now, a shipping company. The very envelope you found so amusing gave me the power to buy everything you see and much more. Billionaire. My mother whispered, as if tasting the word. 1.3 billion, I clarified, as of last night's closing. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, my father looked up at me. If all this is true, Ariana, why did you keep it a secret? Why didn't you tell us? I almost laughed. Tell you? When? The day you were all mocking my inheritance? Or when you, Mom, declared that Grandma didn't value me? Or maybe when you asked me to help with your millions because I'm good with computers? We didn't mean. My mother began. You meant every word. My voice was icy, but beneath it simmered years of hurt. Every single word was sincere. To you, I was a nobody. The poor relative who got nothing while you divided fortunes. So what do you want from us, Ariana? My father asked. Nothing. You've already given me everything I need. You've shown me your true colors. You've proven that to you, a person's worth is measured only by the zeros in their bank account. My father slowly stood up. All right. Let's talk like adults. With this kind of fortune comes serious issues, taxes, legal structures, family obligations. We need to develop a plan to manage this together. And there it was. Not remorse. Not an apology. Just a desire to get a piece of the power. Actually, I said, cutting him off, since we're talking business, there is one matter we need to discuss. I slowly pulled out my phone and opened the relevant document. I recently made an acquisition. I think you'll find it interesting. And what's that? He asked. Scotch Shipping, I answered. Remember, Geneva Equity Partners, the Swiss firm that bought it? They're one of my shell companies. I am the new owner of your business. All the color drained from his face. You bought my company? He whispered. For $45 million, I nodded. Quite generous, considering its debt problems. Why? Because I could. And because you were willing to sell your life's work to anonymous strangers without even thinking to ask if someone in your own family might want to preserve it. Ariana, this is unthinkable, my mother intervened. You can't just go and buy your own father's business. Apparently, I can. It's mine now. Every single asset. My father's face cycled through bewilderment, anger, and something resembling fear. Give it back to me, he finally said. Sell it back. I slowly shook my head. It's no longer for sale. Ariana, that's my life's work. It was your life's work, I corrected. Now it's my investment. I started for the door. We're not leaving until you tell us how you're going to fix this, my mother shouted. I stopped in the doorway. Fix it? What's broken? I made a profitable deal with a willing seller. I bought a house with cash. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ariana. My father's voice broke. Please. For a second, I saw his face, and the old Ariana stirred within me, the one who wanted to save everyone. But then I remembered their laughter. Their pity. Their certainty of my worthlessness. We'll talk again, I said, my voice soft but firm as steel. When you're ready to see me as your daughter, and not as a free assistant or a walking ATM. When the door closed behind them, I was alone in my vast, echoing house. My phone was blowing up with notifications, congratulations from lawyers, reports from analysts, requests from partners. But through all the noise, for the first time since that day in the elevator, I felt not just loneliness, but solitude. And it felt incredibly right. David's call was exactly what I expected, hysterical. He unleashed a barrage of questions, his voice breaking with anger and panic. He had heard from our parents. About the house. The company. The money. He demanded explanations, a family council, a return to the old order. I listened to his yelling while sitting calmly on the terrace of my new estate. The morning sun warmed the marble, and I held a cup of freshly brewed coffee. His panic seemed distant, a sound from another life. When he finally ran out of breath, I responded. I didn't go into details about the envelope or the trust. I told him the simple truth. Grandma saw something you all refused to see, I said. She didn't give me money, she gave me an opportunity. And you missed your chance at the will reading when you decided I was worthless. He started talking about family again, about how we should stick together. Family? I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. What's changed, David, besides the numbers in my bank account? Suddenly my opinion matters? My presence is desired? I didn't wait for an answer. When you decide you respect me, not my resources, then we'll talk. I hung up before he could argue. That evening, as I was selecting a wine in my new cellar, the security system went off. On the monitor, my entire family stood at the gate: father, mother, David, and Ella. They looked like a delegation that had come with an ultimatum. Their visit had been preceded by a series of hysterical calls throughout the day. David's angry tirades, my mother's tearful pleas, my father's veiled threats of a lawsuit. I had ignored them all, instead spending the day with Meredith Blackwood, discussing investments in Boston's commercial real estate. I pressed the intercom button. "How can I help you?" My voice was even. "Ariana, it's us," my mother answered. "We need to come in." "Do you?" After today's threats, I wasn't sure we had anything to talk about. My father intervened, his voice tense. "Please, daughter. Let's sort this out." I hesitated for only a moment. The old me would have opened the gates without a thought. The new me knew the value of control. "All right," I said. "But on my terms. You come in. You listen. You do not interrupt, demand, or threaten. You acknowledge that all of this is mine, by legal right, left to me by my grandmother. Otherwise, the gates will remain closed." After a long pause, my father replied, "We agree. On your terms." I let them in. They entered the foyer, trying not to gawk at the artwork and the scale of the space. I led them to the vast living room, where the panoramic windows already reflected the city's night lights. I sat in an armchair at the head of the room, while they settled uncertainly on the sofa opposite me. "So," I began, leaning back. "What did you want to talk about?" My father cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Ariana, we apologize." "For what, specifically?" I asked. He stammered. For misunderstanding the situation with the will. "We didn't realize what Charlotte had done for you." "It's not about what you didn't realize Charlotte did," I said, cutting him off. "It's about how you treated me when you thought she had done nothing. That's what you should really be sorry for. But you're not apologizing for that, are you? You're apologizing for miscalculating." My mother opened her mouth to say they loved me, but I beat her to it. Love? Was it love when you laughed at my envelope? Or when you, Ella, excused it by saying everyone was in shock? Your reaction wasn't shock, it was your true nature. You always considered me less important, less worthy. David started to say something about how buying our father's company was not normal. "And what was normal, David?" I asked. "That Dad was willing to sell his life's work to anonymous strangers without even offering it to me? That you all made decisions about the family legacy while completely ignoring me? Dad asked me if this was revenge. No. It's just business. I saw an undervalued asset and I acquired it. That's what Grandma taught me." I stood up, feeling the weight of 25 years fall from my shoulders. My mother asked quietly, "What do you want from us, Ariana?" I looked at each of them. "I want you to understand one thing. The Ariana you knew, quiet, invisible, always ready to help, she's gone. In her place is a woman who runs a global corporation and doesn't need anyone's approval to live as she sees fit. Especially not yours. Give me the company back, Ariana." My father's voice was desperate. "It's my legacy, everything I built." I looked at him without sympathy. "You gave it up yourself. You didn't even bother to ask if I was interested." A silence hung in the room, heavy with the realization that the old world had collapsed. Finally, I broke it. "However, there is one path to a possible reconciliation." They all looked at me with hope. "I demand public apologies." From each of you. For your behavior at the will reading. Ella gasped. Publicly? Precisely, I confirmed. Social media posts. A press statement. Wherever you've been bragging about your inheritance, you will just as loudly admit your mistake regarding mine. David jumped up. That's humiliating. Exactly, I replied coldly. Welcome to my world. And if we do this? My father began cautiously, will you give the company back? I allowed myself a faint, cold smile. I will consider your proposal. I promised nothing. I gave them no guarantees. I just gave them a crumb of hope, the most powerful currency of all. A week later, they began to comply. A small article appeared in the business section of the Boston Globe where my father, Richard Scott, admitted to profoundly underestimating the business acumen and true scale of his daughter Ariana's inheritance and regretted any dismissive remarks. My mother, Catherine, posted a more personal, remorseful tweet, apologizing for her mistaken assumptions about her late mother's feelings for me. They paid their price. Following the Globe article and my mother's tweet, short, forced posts from David and Ella appeared on Instagram, admitting their errors in judgment. It was enough to create a storm. Boston's business publications began hunting for information on the mysterious Ariana Scott. I declined all interview requests. My story wasn't ready to be told yet. As for my father's company, I made the most unexpected decision for them. I kept him on as CEO. He kept his office, his duties, his team. Only one thing changed, he now reported to me, through a chain of shell companies. The subtle irony was not lost on any of us. 4 months passed. I agreed to attend a family dinner. For the first time in years, the atmosphere at my parents' house wasn't laced with phoniness. The tension had been replaced by a cautious respect. They looked at me differently. It was my father who broke the silence after dinner. Ariana, I have to tell you something. About the company. I set down my wine glass. I'm listening. It was the best thing that could have happened to it, he said, and there was no bitterness in his voice, only relief. Being part of a larger network, having access to unlimited capital, not worrying about debt every night. It's freed me. I can finally just manage, not just survive. The employees are happy, they have security and benefits. He looked me in the eye. I should have done this years ago. But my pride wouldn't let me admit I was playing out of my league. The silence was broken by my mother. She looked at me for a long time, her usual socialite mask gone. Ariana, she asked softly, can I ask a question that's been bothering me? Have you forgiven us? Truly? I considered her words. Forgiveness isn't quite the right word, I answered. It's more like acceptance. I've accepted that you acted based on what you saw. And you didn't see much. She wanted to object, but I continued. In fact, your disbelief gave me a gift. It forced me to find my own footing instead of relying on yours. If you had always supported me, I would never have known what I was capable of on my own. So you're grateful that we didn't notice? Ella interjected. I'm grateful for the result, I clarified. Grandma could have just left me a fortune. Instead, she left me a path. A path to myself. That turned out to be far more valuable. David, who had been silent all evening, suddenly looked up. There was something new in his eyes, not envy, but self-reflection. I've been thinking about what you said, about earning respect, he began. And I realized that I've never earned anything in my life. Not really. All of it, the inheritance, the connections, it was just handed to me. He took a deep breath. I want to change that. I want to work. For real. Not in a position my father created for me. He looked directly at me. Ariana, I'm asking for a chance. In any of your companies. From the very bottom rung. I want to earn my place. I looked at David for a long time and, for the first time, saw not arrogance in his eyes, but sincere humility. All right, I said. You'll get a job. You'll start in the mailroom. No special treatment. He nodded. I wouldn't ask for more. Later, my father and I stood on the terrace, looking at the lights of Boston. I'm proud of you, Ariana, he said quietly. Not because of the money, but because of who you've become. You're stronger and wiser than I could have ever imagined. He finally understood. Your grandmother was right. She knew you had to realize your own value yourself. Tears welled in my eyes. Thanks, Dad. That evening, my desk was piled high with reports from around the world. The European hotels were breaking records, the New York real estate was preparing for expansion. My empire was growing. But the most important item was a letter from the director of my charitable foundation. The Charlotte Scott Educational Fund was announcing its first grant, $120 million to support science in New England schools. As I prepared the press release, I added a personal note at the end. My grandmother taught me that the greatest gifts sometimes come in the humblest packages. Today, we pass that lesson on to a new generation. For 25 years, I lived in the shadow of others' opinions, but this journey taught me the most important lesson. True worth isn't defined by how others see you, but by how you see yourself. Everything else is just details. From my office window, I could see the neighborhood where my parents lived. I no longer felt bitterness, just a calm acceptance. They had been wrong, but they weren't evil. And I was looking to the future. I opened my calendar for tomorrow, a morning call with the European Hotel Division, negotiations with green energy investors, and then lunch with the mayor of Boston about an affordable housing program. But the first item on my schedule was coffee with Emily, my best friend from my teaching days. That meeting was my anchor, a reminder of who I was, and of the importance of not losing that part of myself, no matter what. A year ago, I was a schoolteacher who inherited an envelope. Today, I ran an empire and a foundation in my grandmother's name. But the real transformation wasn't in my bank accounts, it was in my mind. And now, I hoped that the children who received scholarships from our foundation would feel it too, that their value doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion. If this story resonated with you, give it a like and subscribe. Remember, the most valuable inheritance you can receive is belief in your own strength. Thank you for being with me on this journey.